ACC has shown scant regard for the potential of the 3 elected boards and appointed committees and their plans in council planning and projects, and indeed has sought to remove them in the last 2 representation reviews held every 6 years. We have found a strong sense in the community that some change is needed, with more information and debate required to agree the path to better local government. Therefore, whatever we think is right, even after several years and truckloads of reports, maybe it's time for our leaders to cut out the name calling and rhetoric and frankly stop wasting our rates and collaborate to chart our future with dignity. Given that we are now enmeshed in the statutory process, I beg you, my colleagues and opponents, to recommend to your communities to submit in favour of the current proposal to ensure full and fruitful debate will ensure. I rest my case.
Right, the first speaker from the other team, Chris McKay.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I also speak to you as a son of the hut. I've lived in the hut almost 60 years. I was born and educated here. I had my business here. I've had my business here for 36 years. I've been a ratepayer since 1976. Je suis the hut. I like it that I have easy access to Hutt City councillors and the Mayor, as do all our citizens. We have 12 councillors and 1 Mayor. Under the proposals, we will have only 4 councillors representing us. Don't be fooled by this toothless local board nonsense. They are and would be a waste of time. Recently in Auckland, 21 local boards wrote to their mayor with complaints of feeling distanced, stifled and ignored. The Masterton mayor summed it up succinctly the other day. She said the local boards, she said the Supercity will decide if we get a library, the local board will decide what colour. I like it that we have 1 elected representative for every 7,000 people in the hut, not 1 per 25,000 people as per the proposal. We want to keep the local in local government. If the proposal became reality, half of New Zealand would be represented by only 2 councils. Local government, my foot. I like the way our current representatives listen. They listen to the surveys regarding the Supercity folly. In 2013, 9% of Hutt Valley people and only 3% of Upper Hutt people favoured amalgamation. Last year's survey found the following: Wellington, 76% against. Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt, 80% against. Pororua, 71% against. Kapiti, 61% against. Wairarapa, 84% against. Contrast what our valley politicians are saying with what the opposition is doing and saying. Despite overwhelming opposition to amalgamation, they, like the Local Government Commission, don't listen and won't listen. What is it about no that they don't understand? If this is the honeymoon, how will we be treated after the wedding? A Supercity would be a horrendous train wreck for local democracy. Most Wellingtonians have never ventured past Petone. Do you really think that Wellington, with 3 wards of Rongotai, Lambton and O'Harea, and the majority of the seats, 8, will have the best interests of Heratonga, Totara Park, Nainai, Wainui, Eastbourne or Kelson, let alone Carterton? No way. Let's look at the efficiencies of saving money. Ha ha ha. Remember the Local Government Commission told us that it would cost $184 million? Then a week or so back they said, oh whoops, we've stuffed up. Now it's $210 million. Well, you know what? It'll be $250 million before you can blink. Would a Supercity save any money? Well, here's some actual numbers from Auckland. What they said was the new council would lose 1,200 jobs and save $100 million in wage costs. The reality, job numbers exactly the same, and the additional wage bill is up $90 million. Not only that, but the number of of council officers earning $100,000 has gone up a whopping 53%.
Oh my God.
Will your rates go down? Give me a break. In fact, there will be some suburbs whose rates will go through the roof. Do you think the Supercity, with its headquarters in Wellington, will give jobs to our local contractors? At present, there are almost 300 people working in Lower Hutt, in the Lower Hutt Council, and about 120 in the Upper Hutt offices. Assuming they even keep their jobs, that's over 400 shoppers heading straight to the clutches of Lambton Key retailers, cafes and lunch bars. Is that good for Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt? Yeah. Some other things. Deputy Mayor of Auckland, Penny Hulse, was recently quoted in the New Zealand Herald in response to a question as to how the new council was performing. She said, "The Supercity is expensive, it's unwieldy and it's unfriendly to communities." There's international evidence to prove there's an observable U-shaped relationship with council size and cost effectiveness, meaning more population translates to higher expenditure per capita. Rates will increase, not decrease. Look friends, you know that bigger is not always big better. Let's learn from our Commonwealth cousins across the ditch. It's been a stuff up in Queensland, it's been a stuff up in Toronto. Last time I checked, New Zealand was a democracy. Please do not be bullied by an opinionated minority. Ladies and gentlemen.
Now my pleasure to ask the Mayor of Pururua, Niggett.
Who does he represent? Not the fucking people.
Thanks, Trevor. Kia ora tātou. I represent the opinionated minority from across the hill. So I hope that you will indulge me a little bit this evening as I seek to put the case to you as to why I think amalgamation is a good idea. And I do that as a mayor of a city of 53,000 people, so we're roughly a third of the size of the Hutt Valley. And we think it's best to face the region and be part of it. But can I say, 25 years is a very long time to wait to review something. And we've had a quarter of a century, well, I was at primary school at the time, since we last had any serious look or change to our local government structure in the Wellington region. And I think this is a once-in-a-generation chance to have that look and to make some changes, because I don't think we've reached perfection. And I'm not content with the status quo. I think that a leader's job is always to seek to improve the way they do things for the communities that elect them. And my council has sought to ask at a sort of a principled level, what are the things that we think are really important for local government, for our community and for the Wellington region, and then look at how the structure that might fit around that. You see, it's not all about what the council looks like, it's about what the council does. That's what's actually really important. Now, I was proudly born and bred in Pururua, but I'm also a proud Wellingtonian. And since I've become mayor, I've understood that there are two really distinct parts to local government. The first is the bit we all value. It's local. It's the local decision making, the ability for us as residents to influence and shape the communities that we live in. You know, our council chamber will be filled up over a local alcohol plan, over a playground, over some, thing that's really important to a local neighbourhood. But really, do I get people talk to me about infrastructure, about economic development, about our harbour, about the management of the Wellington environment? So these two distinct parts are actually best governed separately, in my view. Now, Wellington has some issues. We, as a region, and we're an interdependent region. People from Pururua, 15% of our workforce come to the Hutt Valley every day. A huge number of our students come over here or go into Wellington. 50% of our workforce go into Wellington City. We rely on other parts of the region, and it's mutual. We're all dependent on each other. And I would actually like the ability to have more of a say on a regional sense about the local economy here, making sure that Technology Valley goes ahead and putting Pururua's support behind that. That's what this is actually about. It's not about competing against each other, as we so often do. So, on the big stuff around the region, and that's the big stuff I've mentioned: infrastructure, water, sewage, stormwater, economic development. Last year, Wellington lost 5,000 jobs, Auckland and Christchurch gained 50,000. We do have some issues facing our economy. We're one of the lowest regions in terms of productivity. We don't have a spatial plan that will actually manage and predict growth in the Wellington region. And that isn't something that a local community is going to be particularly concerned with, because they trust that that stuff's being done. It's actually not being done as well as it should. And I think the challenge is for us to recognise that local should stay local, and broadly that's what this model does in my view. In Auckland, the boards have about 25% of the budget. They're not toothless tigers. They actually have the ability to influence what goes on in their neighbourhoods, and that's the thing that we value. So I wouldn't be selling my community down the street if I thought this was a worse model. And I put it to you like this. Within my city, we've got some of the wealthiest communities in the country and some of the lowest income. You've got Whitby and Canons Creek next to each other. How do they survive in one council? Both two really big parts of Porirua City Council. How do they survive? Because we as a council hand over neighbourhood planning and decision making and allow their distinctness to come through, and their values and their needs to be recognised at local government level. Now, I know that can work within Porirua. That can work Stokes Valley to Miramar. That can work Kapiti to Kandala. Our communities are all distinct. It doesn't matter if they're next door to each other or 25 kilometres away from each other. But they have the same things in common in terms of networked infrastructure, economic development, and ensuring we've got a strong economy for our kids into the future.
Thank you, Trevor. First of all, can I say from the outset that I and the Upper Hutt City are not opposed to change, particularly when the outcomes are specific and compelling. I think one of the issues that's missing in this argument has been that evidence-based facts are far from being debated. I want to highlight just a couple of things so you realise the importance of what I'm talking about that our first speaker raised. And I believe that the amalgamation of councils in the Wellington region is not just a local issue for each of our cities, but it's a national issue. I say that because you heard from our earlier speaker that in reality the amalgamation of the Wellington councils will put local government of half the population of the two councils in the country. I think that raises many alarm bells, not only for our region, but for the whole country. The implication, I believe, is enormous, and so are the risks. When you extrapolate that very clearly, we can see that the whole country could be controlled by 4 or 5 councils. That's a far cry from local democracy. Remember, New Zealand also, local government in New Zealand units are typically larger by international standards. I now want to go down to the local level and again highlight what was said earlier as we go into the local boards. They are absolute lame ducks. They are a stop to the to the discussion about local democracy, and I believe they are an insult to local communities. Remember, the local boards in this proposal are only guaranteed for 5 years. After that, they're likely to disappear. As we said, it's only recently that the Auckland boards wrote to the Auckland Mayor telling that they were distant, stifled, and felt they were being ignored. These boards will have no power or control, so their ability to function for local communities, I believe, is nil. When you don't control the purse strings or the finances, and you have to go to Big Brother in Wellington City, cap in hand and plead for money, like we're now seeing in Auckland, much of that money is not filtering down, and local boards are having great difficulty in carrying out any of their functions. So, the local boards are designed, I believe, to actually create dysfunction, and we see that happening in Auckland now. Local boards only have a reason to focus on their very local areas, and in fact, spending their money in that local area and very little else. They create a lot of noise, but with no budget to control, their authority and ability to respond to their public will be non-existent. Remember, large-scale entities also, which we're seeing in Auckland, don't stay in touch with their customer base, and particularly outside their main population centres. These entities become very centralised, and we see that occurring in Auckland, and it will occur here, and the increased bureaucracy and distance from the customers gets greatly increased. One of the things that concerns me about this proposal, the local government reform, is that there is no government strategy to govern local reform. I fail to understand and are unsure as to the framework for the reform and that the local government is trying to commission. There is certainly across the country, there doesn't appear to be a basis or any principles for which the current reform is intended to operate. These reforms, if you look around the country, in the far north, in the Hawke's Bay here in Wellington, are all very ad hoc. We should be attacking the changes in local government in the area, I believe, of local government functions rather than size and scale. We see that already in Wellington, where many of the regional issues that we're dealing with are dealing with together in the formation of the Economic Development Agency, Civil Defence and Emergency Management, Waste Management, minimisation, all working together. We also know that roading and transport should also be done on a regional basis. I believe there is no question that regionalisation of these functions with appropriate changes to government arrangements and retention of local government ownership will improve the delivery and efficiencies for all of us in the region without having to change the local government structure. So I believe central government should be mandating the local government commission to be putting more pressure on them to amalgamate, not to be amalgamating councils, but to amalgamating their functions and some of the things that should be done regionally. Doing this will give us huge economic benefits and efficiencies. So finally, can I say, by doing that, I think we will get the desired outcomes by local government and the local people who still have control and have input to the local issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. We're now going to hear from one of the main proponents for the change, the Honourable Wellington, Chair of the Wellington Council.
Conflict of interest. She wants to be mayor. Super mayor. Super mayor.
Maybe you could just listen. Thank you everyone. Kia ora tātou. Thanks for coming
honey.
tonight. This proposal is about the future. It's not about who's going to be around any particular council table next year. It's about whether there will be jobs for our children and grandchildren and whether in fact they'll even stay in this region. Some of us have already lost them from this region and others will follow. It's instructive that in making its recommendations the Commission focused very much on saying the regional issues are the big ones, the local stuff's going well, let's leave it pretty much as it is, and they put a lot of effort into talking about the powers and responsibilities of local boards. They said the local boards would carry out the responsibilities and powers of the new council unless the matters were regional. And they've certainly made a presumption of localness, which is what they're required to do after under the law. People need to read the report. I know it's big, but if you can, look at it on the web and actually read it. There's a lot of stuff in it. The boards are going to be interesting, and I want to talk about them. Chris called them toothless. Wayne said no power or control. The local boards will not just chip in options, which is how Ray has described them publicly. The Commission noted that it's not till the final report that they can say what the powers of the local boards might be, but they have given a lot of thought and they've given it a huge amount of detail so people would understand, and they've asked for feedback on the powers of local boards. They specifically said their proposals reflect the statutory requirements that the Local Government Act provides for boards, lessons learned from Auckland's, and in particular the Commission's view that maximum possible allocations to local boards consistent with effective decision making is desirable. So these powers would be set up from the start, and the law is such that if the boards are undertaking something they are legally required to do, or that the Commission decided they should do in the reorganisation proposal, that function will be legally protected, and it cannot be removed by the Council, and it must be funded. So nobody's going to be going begging cap in hand. We were interested in the regional council on this part of the equation because we believe the local board is the foundation of this, and we sought some independent legal advice which confirmed indeed that the local functions decided by the Commission would be protected by law. It's called an order in council, and it's part of the law. Opponents of change say the region has performed well, there's no need for it. If you don't want to believe the Local Government Commission report and Statistics New Zealand, which they quote, have a look at the last Burr report on last year's economy in the Wellington region. GDP growth, New Zealand 3.2%, Wellington 1.1%, and Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt both in negative figures. And it gets worse. GDP per capita, the same. New Zealand 1.6, Wellington 0.1, Lower and Upper Hutt in negatives. Employment growth, the same. New Zealand twice what the Wellington region is, and again the Hutt Valley in negatives. We are in trouble. This is actually serious. They are serious indicators, and we need to do something about them. Another of the drivers for change is demographic changes. And the Commission said something that everybody in New Zealand knows now. We're all getting older, all of us. And much of the population increase, they said, forecast in the Hutt Valley and Wairarapa is in people aged 65 and over, and this will in time erode the ability to pay for local services of these communities. We're all going to be on national super at some stage, some of you probably are now, and we're going to find rate increases hard to afford. Chris Mackay talked about Auckland. Well, a few numbers. And I just got these recently from the Auckland Council. 600 effective full-time staff members fewer than at amalgamation, at the same time that the Auckland population has increased by the size of an average New Zealand town. Rates predicted to go up 9% pre-amalgamation. New rates since the new Auckland Council have been under 4%, looking at 2.9% this year. Of course, some people had massive rates increases. Do you know why? Because they changed from land value to capital value. But none of the thousands of Aucklanders who got rates decreases were ever on the front of the Herald complaining. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about the future, and frankly, people will pay to help the rest of the region. The Hutt Valley itself is a beneficiary of the rest of the region now with the flood control work, about 25 million or so paid in the last 10 or 12 years by the rest of the region to Hutt Valley. This is what will happen with the regional side of the new organisation, and I am asking you to read the report before you make up your minds. This is a very detailed report, and it is a blueprint for the future, 20 or 30 years' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fran. We're now going to move to questions. Oh, sorry, no, we're not.
He's having a bad run.
You can tell who I was most worried about controlling, can't you? Ray Wallace.
Well, kia ora and good evening, everybody. Firstly, I want to thank Trevor, despite all those hiccups. Thank him for organising tonight's meeting, and thank each and every one of you for coming along to what is a very important issue, not only for this city, not only for this valley, but for this region. And I want to start by saying, firstly, as the Mayor of Lower Hutt, I believe that we live in the best region in this country. It is a wonderful region, and it's a wonderfully diverse region. But there's not one single voice that can represent all of us. And I want to be clear tonight, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's debate is not about change versus no change. Tonight's debate is whether or not a super city is best for the Wellington region, whether it wants it or whether it needs it. And the affirmative team have tried to convince you that it's absolutely needed. Well, I can tell you that the information we're going to give you clearly shows it's not. I do not want, as we've heard from the speakers here on my right, for Hutt City and Lower Hutt and the Hutt Valley to be painted as stubborn, silent majority, resistant to progress. We're happy with change, as long as it's smart change. And the proposal before us for this super city is not smart change. for those that are pushing the stale, one-size-fits-all, tried and failed model, they are the ones with the outmoded thinking. There are the ones that are truly resistant to true progressive change that takes people with them. And this proposal has generated so much upset amongst not only this community but in the region, it can only be described as madness. This region does not want amalgamation. The local government commissioners, and I acknowledge the team that are here today, they are the officers. The commissioners need to stop. They need to listen to the people. 80% of this valley and 75% of the region have said no change to boundaries. The commissioners need to look at the facts and they need to throw out this proposal. So I'm pleased to hear Emma say that is an option for the commissioners. You good folk have to put into submissions to make sure they throw this proposal out. Absolutely, as Nick has said, there's opportunities for improvement in this region, and I agree with them. But we support working with the mayors and Mayor Guppy, who chairs the Mayoral Forum, and we're doing that. We're starting to see real things happening in this region. We've looked at amalgamation or mergers with the water services, with our economic development, with our emergency management, those things that are truly regional. We are now doing